Commencement. How exciting! I'm Luann Walker, Director of the Master of Fine Arts program in Creative Writing and Literature here at Stony Brook, Southampton, and Manhattan. But I also think of this evening as a literary salon of the highest caliber. Here to introduce our commencement speaker is Robert Reeves, provost of our campus, a man who has worked tirelessly to build our programs, who has ensured our stability, and who has made sure that these programs are rigorous, supportive, and, yes, that we never lose our sense of humor. Bob?
Thank you, Luann. I add my congratulations to our new graduates and to their parents, relatives, friends, loved ones. You have all met the difficult challenge of creating art and the requirements of this program, and you have prevailed. And now you are going out in a blaze of glory. But wait, you're not going out. We're not truly letting you go. With the ceremony this evening, you simply transition from MFA student to MFA alum, but you maintain your lifelong membership in our community of artists. For a few commencement remarks, I am delighted to introduce a longtime member of our faculty and a longtime friend of our programs. Billy Collins is the author of over 15 volumes of poetry, and over the years, I am happy to say that many of those poems were originally published in the Southampton Review. Billy has taught a poetry workshop for us every summer for over 20 years. He taught for us even before he was first named U.S. Poet Laureate. His first reading as Poet Laureate was actually in Duke Lecture Hall, which is just downstairs, at least if I were in my office. So we can honestly say we knew him when. I probably don't have to review for you what is so extraordinary about his work. But for me, his poems rise again and again to meet the great challenge of life, how to get through not a crisis, but an ordinary moment of an ordinary day. His poems apply pressure to these moments, and you're hardly aware he's doing it, but the pressure slowly increases until the moment is transformed, no longer ordinary, but vibrating with meaning, filled with light. These moments, which the very stuff of our lives, these are the moments we are always told to value, to treasure, that we should be in these moments, that we should seize these moments. Well, Billy Collins seizes them for us. It's an amazing effect, and he makes it seem so effortless that you are fooled into thinking it is easy, that you could do it yourself. But of course you can't. And since you can't, and I can't, that makes Billy's voice indispensable. And we are so lucky to have him this evening with us for a few remarks on this happy occasion. Please welcome to the virtual podium my friend, Billy Collins.
Well, Bob, thank you for that introduction. And I think we all you could all join me and thank Bob and Roger and Luann and Carla and Julie and so many people who keep this splendid program on its feet and up and running. Well, this is a happy day for you, isn't it? Amazingly happy. I mean, I can't see you exactly, but I can feel you poised on the edge of your chairs to kind of leap into the public and give readings and be interviewed and get published and all that. And you'll go out and give readings, and you'll meet your public. You'll meet your readers. And you thought meeting the writer was disappointing, man. Well, here I just wanted to we're going to get to you in a second, but this is about you. But this is just a 5-line poem of mine. It's a true thing, and based on my experience on the road, and it's called Feedback. The woman who wrote from Phoenix after my reading there to tell me they were all still talking about it just wrote again to tell me that they had stopped. It actually happened. I'm not sure what she was thinking about. So, well, first of all, congratulations on 2 counts. One, congratulations on choosing this terrific, splendid, I'm using that word too often, splendid writing program at Stony Brook, at SUNY Stony Brook, Southampton. And second of all, congratulations on meeting all your requirements and actually graduating. So I'm just going to give you a few remarks about being a writer. Just thinking of yourself as being writers shows that you are all introspective people. You spend a lot of time, maybe too much time, in your subjectivity, thinking about everything. Fiction writers and dramatists are thinking about other people, and poets are thinking mostly about themselves. But I'm just exaggerating, but not really. But one of the questions that, of course, comes up in your introspective moments is, why write at all? Why bother? What's the point? Wisława Szymborska, the Polish poet, she said that she preferred the absurdity of writing poetry to the absurdity of not writing poetry. That's about the best answer I've heard of. Less clever ones, such as ourselves, might say, well, it's to express myself, it's to say the unsayable, it's to bring my vision into the world. But I personally like Erica Jong's one. She said the reason she writes, she said, quote, her motive was so no one can shut me up after I'm dead. And that puts a nice point on it, doesn't it? Now, a slightly more elegant version of that was said by the French psychologist and theorist Jacques Lacan. He said that we die twice. This is upbeat enough for you, but there's a happy ending. We die twice. We have one death is when we die bodily. Our body goes and we die. The other death is when the last memory of us leaves the world, when we are completely forgotten. So there's a time between when your body dies and when the memory of you dies. And Lacan called this le temps entre les deux morts, the time between the two deaths. And the thing is, if you're a writer, among other kinds of people who are well known, you can prolong your second life and delay your second and, I might add, final death. Now, so Aeschylus is still alive, right? Shakespeare is still alive. John Berryman is still alive. They're all still going. And so that's an incentive to write well, because that will make you last. Bad writing doesn't seem to last very long for some reason or other. So commencement address should be motivational, and that's about the high point of my motivational comments. This is one more thing. There's a lot said about finding your voice, and you found it maybe in the MFA program. Maybe you're still looking for it. It took me until I was in my 30s to find my voice. Finding your voice is not finding a tone in which to write that is truly you. It could be. That's possible. But that's not the outside world doesn't recognize that because it doesn't know who you truly are anyway. And maybe neither do you. Finding your voice, and this sounds a little crude, not crude, but real. Finding your voice means writing like no one else can. That's your voice. It might be connected to your soul and your inner authenticity, but the world doesn't care about that. You're recognized as having a voice if you find a way to write like no one else writes. So even finding your voice is competitive. Okay. The situation today is an older writer, that's the part played by me, talking to younger writers. At least I hope you're younger than I am if you're just getting your MFA now. Excuse me, you'd be off to a late start. The best example or the best expression of that situation is a poem by W.S. Merwin. And I'm going to read that to you. And it's called Berryman. And of course, it's John Berryman the poem's about. And it's about a meeting with Berryman and a dialogue that took place. Merwin being you, the younger writer. Merwin was 13 years, 13 years younger than Berryman. But Berryman was much more accomplished. And so there's that reputation as well. He was farther along in the, further along in the writing path. So here's Merwin sitting with Berryman at his feet, so to speak, and hearing about getting advice about being a writer. So the poem is titled Berryman, and it's by W.S. Merwin. I will tell you what he told me in the years just after the war, as we then called the Second World War. Don't lose your arrogance yet, he said. You can do that when you're older. Lose it soon, and you may merely replace it with vanity. Just one time he suggested changing the usual order of the same words in a line of verse. Why point out a thing twice? He suggested I pray to the muse, get down on my knees and pray right there in the corner, and he said he meant it literally. It was in the days before the beard and the drink, but he was deep in tides of his own, through which he sailed, chin sideways and head tilted like a tacking sloop. He was far older than the dates allowed for, much older than I was. He was in his 30s. He snapped down his nose with an accent I think he had affected in England. As for publishing, he advised me to paper my wall with rejection slips. His lips and the bones of his long fingers trembled with the vehemence of his views about poetry. He said the great presence that permitted everything and transmuted it in poetry was passion. Passion was genius, and he praised movement and invention. I had hardly begun to read. I asked, how can you ever be sure that what you write is really any good at all? And he said, you can't. You can't. You can never be sure. You die without knowing whether anything you wrote was any good. If you have to be sure, don't write. Not sure that's the best advice to leave you with, but so I know some of you, but I wish all of you a interesting career in writing. Never, when you give a reading, read slowly and don't laugh at your own stuff. That's all I got to tell you. All right, so very good luck to you. You're lucky to have been through this great program, and I hope that luck, and you need a little bit of it to succeed, follows you through and sticks with you for the rest of your life and career. Okay, good luck.
Billy, that was wonderful. I loved hearing about the woman from Phoenix and her feedback. Whoa. And now we get to hear from our graduates. You all know how proud our faculty members are of you. We've mentored you, we've felt heartsick when you've hit rocky patches, and we've delighted in your triumphs. Here for the first presentation is distinguished university professor, novelist, memoirist, playwright, and piano player, Roger Rosenblatt. Roger?
Thank you, Lou Ann, and it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce my former student, I'm sorry to say, Jillian LaRussa.
Thank you so much, Roger. Today I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my memoir. It's from the start of the first chapter. I meet Mike at a mutual friend's bridal shower that I do not know is a bridal shower until I am there with my sneakers kicked up atop an empty chair, hoping no one will talk to me, Cool Ranch Dorito bowl resting on my stomach to deter anyone that may dare get close. I cannot eat Doritos, but my hand is an automatic claw, rising to my mouth with the precision of an ancient coin-operated wish machine at Coney Island. It is not the first time I meet Mike. Back in high school, when I could read myself a new life, I would dream cast my classmates into the roles I connected to the most. There was this one character, a bad boy, but a bad, sad boy, that particularly struck me, and I was desperate to give a face to the name in my fantasies. If I went to the bathroom in the E-Tower hallway during my lunch period, a far walk but perfect for pretending to be a part of a fictional life, I would see him. He had dyed, colorful hair back then. He still wore black skinny jeans. He never smiled. But there was something about the pull of his neck, the way it arched forward at an angle, like a cobweb slung on a tree branch as he loped across from F Tower to the library, that made me choose him. I am sitting in Mike's basement, far from my 15-year-old self, touching that same bit of skin, talking about what fun hue to dye next when he says, well, in high school I had blue hair. I am stunned, silent, and stupid, and when I do speak, when I do spill my story, I do not think he feels the weight rest upon his shoulders, but I never unsee it. And like with that bad, sad boy, we do not work out too.
Thank you, Jillian. I want to tell you a little about Jillian, too little as a matter of fact, because I could go on and on. There are 3 Jillians I will present to you. The first is the writer, the breathtakingly good writer, Jillian. Robert Lopez, who was the second reader of her thesis, which will be a book, Paper Dolls, called her exquisite, her writing exquisite, daring, provocative. All of that is true. She talks about writing in this memoir. She talks about her family, talks about thinking. Sometimes she can be extremely moving. Sometimes she can be extremely funny, as when she tells you, gives you a little treatise on how to quit a job by stealing all the stuff in the office. It's a remarkable book. A teacher comes across a book once in a lifetime. I was very lucky, blessed, to be able to read Paper Dolls. Then there is Jillian, the student, and I've never seen a student like her. That is, I've never seen a student to whom other students turn so willingly, so happily, because she was so generous with her comments, and so smart with her comments, and so useful. They knew they were in the presence of a superior writer, but she never let on that she thought she was superior at all. I was in the catbird seat. I could sit back and watch it. They turned to her for advice. They needed her. She gave them what they needed. The thing is very rare in a student. And finally, Jillian, the person, who is the kind of person everybody wants to know and be with. She is tough and she is sensitive. She's able to stand on her own 2 feet. She never whines, never complains. She has supported herself. She has had one long job in a restaurant, and any place who employs her is blessed. When she is self-employed as a writer, it will be something to see. So Jillian, the writer, Jillian, the student, Jillian, the person. We have, the department has a gift for Jillian, which is the poetry of Robert Penn Warren. Robert Penn Warren was truly a great poet, one of the great poets of the 20th century. Why he's been neglected, I have no idea. He's known for his prose, but it was the poetry that really is the strength. And it's the strength of Jillian, too, though she, too, writes prose and poetry, but poetic prose. The thing, the center of Robert Penn Warren was he was able to find a whole world in something small, what John Donne used to call a little world made cunningly. Jillian can see this, Robert Penn Warren could see this, and so I hope this book will be of great use and pleasure to her. So we present this book, Robert Penn Warren, to Jillian LaRussa.
Thank you so much, Roger. It was an honor to be your student, and I consider it an even greater honor to have you as a lifelong friend. So thank you so much.
A lifelong friend it is. Now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Susie Merrill.
Thank you, Roger. It is my great pleasure to introduce my friend and mentee, Rob Taylor.
Thank you, Susan. This has been a great ride. I loved working on this thing with you. I'm going to read from my thesis, When We Were Poison. And this excerpt is from towards the end where she gets back together with her boyfriend. She was content with time no longer existing, content with the vacuum that was his apartment, content with fully going nocturnal, passing out around 11 in the morning, waking up at 5 in the evening. She was content with 4 in the morning becoming her 2 in the afternoon, and 2 in the afternoon feeling like 1 in the morning. She was content with confusing days and letting weeks disappear. She was content with never knowing how he was able to get through the day, content with always being tired. She was content with sitting on the futon until she was sore, content with hobbling around the apartment, content with pain in her lower back and right foot, content with the idea that there were too many things to watch on TV, losing interest in watching anything at all. She was content with saying, "I'll shower tomorrow," and that rarely being true. She was content with him not saying anything about it. She was content with him with passing time, filling up empty bottles, packing the fridge for whenever Damien wanted them. Content with selling more bottles to older, disheveled men and women usually coming back from night shifts and college-looking kids in his building. Kids who would say things like, "Yeah, I'm old enough," or, "What? I'm not telling nobody nothing." They never saw her making the drinks. She would have them wait outside, told them to come when Damien was at work. She was content with making some money from it. $5 here, $20 there went a long way. She was content with the reality of making more doing this than she would catering. The week of Halloween, she made almost $800. Friends of friends to the college kids in his building. Some of them bought in bulk. Some brought over small jugs. Some looked really young, too young. She was content with never asking. She was content with him never knowing. She was content with always feeling alone. Content with sporadic day trips outside with Yasmin to feel less alone, only to hate going outside. She was content watching him go straight for the fridge and chug a bottle she just made for him. Content with a few laughs from him here, a massaging of her legs there, a kiss on the cheek at Friendsgiving. She was content with him falling asleep on top of her. She was content with the time he wet the bed, pissing on her legs while he was in a stupor. She jumped up, which made him jump. She could see his eyes snap out of a blackout. She was content with his apology, weeping outside of the bathroom door. He kept her company while she took a shower. She was still not used to sharing the bathroom at the end of the hall. She was content with her customers getting angry, content with blowing a lot of money on Chinese food, content with sending money to Tori through Venmo, content with Tori rejecting it after not taking her calls. She was content with the phone company threatening to cut off her cell phone. She was content with him forgetting things, content with him shriveling away in front of her eyes as if he'd gone on hunger strike to get away from her, content with him no longer making sense, content with him always angry at something, the spoiling anger for everything else but her.
That was wonderful, Rob. That was really wonderful. So, working with Rob Taylor has been such a satisfying experience. Rob came to me with this weird idea. I want to write a novel about a woman who can make alcohol in her body. And I thought, okay, let's see. I didn't believe at first that the story Rob wanted to tell could be told without falling into every speculative science fiction trope there is. But that's because I didn't know Rob well enough. There are no tropes here. Rob is both heart and headstrong. He builds scene and creates character carefully. He's funny. His eyes catch everything. He is open and imaginative and diligent, and you can see this on every page of When We Were Poison. When I was trying to select a book for Rob, I kept thinking about Theodore Dreiser, who tackled the most unforgiving subjects: financial world, prostitution, murder. His subjects were challenging, but they became vivid story in his hands. And that's what Rob has done in his novel. And I'm so delighted to give him Dreiser's An American Tragedy as a show of support for Rob's gritty themes and his gift for naturalism, for transmuting metaphor into cogent, moving story.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
It's an honor.
I'm so eager to see what you do, Rob, from here on in. I'm really excited for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird book to pick. I really, It was so hard trying to imagine what was the right book for you. And then I started to realize, like, the thing that you did that was so magical was you took something almost implausibly impossible and you made it completely real on the page. And that made me think of Dreiser and how he works. So I hope you like the book.
Well,
And
yeah, I mean, I loved everything you gave me so far. So this is definitely most likely
Yeah, I hope
will be a favorite.
Good. And now I'm going to toss the mic to Amy.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Max Parker reading from Terrible Vegan People.
Thank you, Amy. 5 days since the breakup, Baby still hasn't called, and Hollywood figures romance is dead for good. After Baby, nothing will be revolutionary again. By the time you read this, Seattle will be ordinary, done with. Don't even bother unless you're full-blooded tech. This is not to say Baby gatekeeps Hollywood's queerness. Rather, without Baby, Hollywood is meant to go where and do what, and not to mention with who. Outside Hollywood's bedroom window, dirty glass midday, plain people pass by wearing different versions of the same outfit. Black boots, black pants, black shirt. Every so often a red car drives by. No birds. Sometimes you're ready for a relationship and sometimes you're not, Hollywood's new roommate says when she hears the news. A sitcom statement, blank of specificity. Hollywood still looks out the bedroom window. Somehow, the sky is now dark. The new roommate leans uncommitted in the doorway. She is not as interactive as the old one, who flipped pancakes and moved her hands while she spoke and ate large amounts of antihistamines for fun. The new roommate just watches TV, that's it. But a boring audience is still an audience. The couple breaks up all the time. Ask anyone at the juice bar where Hollywood gossips. Somehow it is always Hollywood's fault. By now the comic value is washed up. Hollywood needs to grow up, get sober, stop fucking around. Seattle is over.
That was wonderful, Max. Thank you so much. Max's novel, Terrible Vegan People, follows a narrator named Hollywood through a breakup at a grocery store, which triggers the subsequent identity spiral in the midst of Seattle's queer scene during the West Coast tech boom. With the help of karaoke and mindful living, Hollywood remains unaware of consequences. This novel looks at questions of authenticity and queer identity, social capitalism, loneliness. Max's writing is mordantly funny, very quotable, utterly original. Max, the book I chose for you is No One Is Talking About This by Patricia Lockwood.
Thank you. Amy, I'm so excited. I am in the middle of Priest Daddy, and she's a hoot and a half.
Yes.
I'm very excited. Thank you so much, Amy, and thank you to Genevieve as well, who's my second reader, and to Kristen Rapinion, who's my third, and to Stony Brook in general as well.
That was wonderful, Max. Thank you again. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Paul Harding.
Thank you, Amy. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our graduating student, Jordan Blue, who will be reading to us from his novel, The Only Promise.
Hello, hello. So this actually comes from the first 20 pages of the book. This is right after the main character has woken up from a nightmare, and we've just been introduced to him. His name is Felix, and the secondary protagonist here is Jillian, whose perspective we're in. Hello! Jillian shifted the tray of food in her arm. She glanced around at the offices of the third floor, empty as always. Felix? She knocked again, harder this time. Make her be damned, are you still sleeping in there? She let out a heaving sigh of exasperation. She wasn't entirely surprised that he'd forgotten. Though the seemingly endless shelves of his librarium were kept in near-perfect order, Felix, despite outward appearances, was a scattered thing. Twice so as unorganized as she. It wasn't anything to get twisted up over, his being late. He was in the thick of things now, with his presentation looming, yet she couldn't help feel disappointed. She'd hoped that, today, just maybe, From past the tall oaken door to Valix's study came a dull thud, a vast rustling of papers that spoke of disorder. Godless Garance, just one moment. Jillian grinned at the alarm in his voice. Her disappointment evaporated like saline, a substrate over Ithril. If you've not got the time, she began, grinning impishly in spite of herself, I could just come back another time. The door swung abruptly outward, and the draft it created sent a flurry of papers skirting along the floor into the hall. Valix did not seem to notice. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his cheeks darker than their usual shade of azure, with blush as he stared down at her. Jazz, he began. I didn't realize. You have my most humble apologies. Please understand I got some much-needed rest. She inclined an eyebrow to him. Even with the deep azure tone of his skin, she could make out the dark patches beneath his eyes. Try as she did to tell him, the fiending bookmonger just refused to get a decent night's sleep. Valix stared blankly at her for a moment. There was something off in that look, what might have been a flicker of distress in those wide eyes. Well, he said slowly, not exactly, but... He shook his head, and when he met her gaze again the look had left him. He smiled, showing his full array of teeth. They were each as long as the digits of Jazzian fingers, thin and sharp as daggers, interlocking beside one another like the fingers of clasped hands. The wall of jagged, predatory fangs might once have sent Jazzian running in fear, but now the sight of them only put a warmth into her heart. He was the last thing to be afraid of. How'd you guess?
Being your thesis advisor has brought with it the unexpected good luck of taking a master class in epic fantasy. I remember reading the opening chapters of your novel for the first time and thinking, good grief, there's already enough material here for 6 books. To which, when I asked you about it, you calmly and patiently responded, actually, it's more like 12 books. So it's been such an inspiration watching you work tirelessly, seriously, conscientiously, but also cheerfully, energetically, and with such enthusiasm to build a universe full of legends and myths and adventures and quests, and to compose an unapologetically vast story that takes the reader from the A to the Z of an entire cosmos, all while pondering the deepest questions. Who are we? Why are we here? What is here? Is there a God? Are there many gods? What if there isn't? What if there aren't? The scope of your imagination is downright astonishing. I'm so thankful, Jordan, for your open-mindedness, your receptivity, and your commitment not just to good, but to fine writing. My sincerest congratulations, and I'd like to present you with this collection of Philip K. Dick novels from the Library of America.
Thank you, Paul. And it's really been a pleasure working with you. We still got a ways to go on the actual published version of the book, but it's been a blast, and I'm excited to keep moving with this project.
That's great. It's been my pleasure. And now let's hand it over to Julie Sheehan.
Well, thanks, Paul. And it's my great honor to introduce our next poet, an amazing poet. Please welcome the incredible Grace Dilger.
Hi, thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. I'm going to be reading 2 poems from my thesis manuscript, and the first poem is called Handout. At 15, I was 100 pounds in soaking denim, tits like cornflowers, the bachelor's button, and the garnet flush of my cheeks itched in the draft of the crack window frame. You photographed me on your flip phone, ripping a blunt loose as a sandcastle. Your blonde braids patted my gums as you enlarged, and after, I said, "Let me see it." You offered me your dick like a macaroon on a platter, but I had meant, "See the picture." And the second poem is called Beers, Bikes, Barbecue. In a rock and roll themed chain bar and grill outside Wilmington, North Carolina, a boy of 5 plops down beside his ponytailed father for a meal. On the sleek bar top, wet like a tongue, he lines his toys up, itemizing. 1 plastic grenade, jelly candy orange safety clip, pin and ring, 1 slime green pistol with a tangerine slide, and a rubbery gray hunting knife, so realistic he might have got shot, but damn, that boy there, he's deeply alabaster. At Mac's Speed Shop, the father mock throws the explosive, signaling shrapnel in the smoked meat thick air. Their brisket basket arrives, and they split it.
fantastic, Grace. Reading Grace Dilger's poetry collection, We Loved Our Boys, thrills in the way that thrift store shopping thrills. We're entering a world of chance with syntax and narrative stability and image fields racked madly alongside size 17 bell bottoms, a Chanel jacket, and a men's bowling shirt in search of nothing less than the human condition. But bracing this mashup is a consistent worldview, a voice that, like John Ashbery's, accounts for this dazzling collage of syntactic verve. The shopkeeper's eye curates the wares, tagging each garment like a gender role waiting to be performed. Questions of agency patrol the aisles, memory haunts them. Ashbery would have loved We Loved Our Boys. Its humor, its daring, its investigation of whether and how we can be sincerely, authentically ourselves. And so, on behalf of your thesis committee and advisor, Cornelia Seedy, I present you with the collected poems of John Ashbery.
Oh, thank you so much. That's amazing. Oh, I love Ashbery, and that's such a huge compliment. Thank you so much, Julie. I'd like to thank my entire thesis board, Julie, Cornelia Seedy, as well as Ariana Rains, and all of my friends and grad school fam that I made at SBU, Frank for always being a tech wizard, and just everyone who helped me get to graduation. It's been a really fun time, and I really enjoyed it.
The pleasure's all ours, Grace. And now, speaking of pleasures, back to the indefatigable Susie Merrill.
Thank you, Julie. And it is my great pleasure to introduce the wonderful Margot Hughes.
Thanks, Susie. So I'm going to read a little bit from my thesis, which is a novel. The house was different. Quieter, yes, but also smaller somehow. Elaine thought she would feel the emptiness of the space her mother once took up, that the house would feel bigger with her missing. But instead, Elaine felt constricted in the pain of her absence, like her mother's presence had made the house expand somehow. Like Ruth making herself small had given the girls room to grow. Now the air at home was thick, ready to lure in the next woman who would be its caretaker, submit to its prison. It was tempting, Elaine hated to admit. The way her father sulked around, looked lost, like a puppy without an owner, one who hadn't realized he needed one until she was gone. Like all this time, he was the one who thought he was in charge of Ruth, but really he couldn't survive without her. Elaine loved her father. She didn't want to see him this way. She thought, only every so often, that maybe it wouldn't be so bad to live with him, to stay and take care of him for the rest of his days. No, Elaine couldn't let herself regress. Not this time. That was the air talking. The air of this house, the air of this town, the air of this world that so desperately needed to keep girls in their place to allow the boys only to thrive. No, it was Elaine's turn to thrive too. She would live at home for now. It would help her save money while she saved up for college. This was temporary. She'd take care of her father until she found out where she was accepted, and then she would leave forever. She would come back for holidays and call him on his birthday and visit her mother's grave, but she would never let a man call her his again. Not the way Tom and her father wanted to. In that sense, she would leave forever and never look back. Yes, this was only temporary. Thank you.
It's great. It's wonderful because you've actually illustrated absolutely everything I wanted to say. So, Margot Hughes is such a clear and focused writer. She works hard, listens to critique, and works hard again. It is a rare pleasure to mentor someone so open to suggestion, so willing to try anything, and so conscientious in her choices. The Good Girls, Margot's thesis, tells the story of two sisters and their mother as they navigate their roles in a small town so conservative that the women's movement has barely been felt. Can I work and be a wife? Why is my pregnancy my fault and not my rapist's? What does it mean to be a good girl? Margot's gift and her excellence is manifest in the way she uses her characters in service of larger social concerns. It's remarkable to look through the prism she's created to see how each of her characters chooses and is chosen by paths that come to seem inevitable. Because of her lovely attention to the way individual needs are often subsumed by societal restrictions, I have chosen Elizabeth Spencer's novels for Margot.
Thank you so much. That was so nice.
You're so welcome. I'm so pleased for you, and I can't wait to see what happens to you as you go forward.
Thank you so much, Susie. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you're so welcome, Margot. And this will be coming in the mail to you.
Oh, thank you.
You're so welcome. Now I'm going to throw the mic to Amy.
Thank you. Next, Penelope Mermal is going to read from her novel, Diary.
Thank you. I'm going to read 3 entries from Diary. May 17th, 2015. I had coffee this afternoon with my friend Howie. It's been 6 months since his wife died. It was Wendy who was the coffee drinker, buying it casually, already ground, choosing whatever was on sale. After Wendy died, Howie left tea for coffee, saying he felt awful drinking tea all those years when he could have bonded with Wendy over French roast. Howie is trying to make up for it by choosing his beans with care, examining them up close in his palm, buying organic ones to grind in his new expensive grinder, a cup at a time. He calls himself a coffee purist, does not use milk or sugar like he did in his Lipton. Being a coffee purist has given Howie a way to ease his guilt. He was cheating on Wendy the morning she collapsed from a heart attack outside Gristides, her carefully chosen lemons rolling into the street. May 20th. Dear Diary, I love living in New York with its many museums that lift my feet off the ground and send me sailing, its endless streets to witness sights that top my imagination. The lit-up Empire State Building blowing neon colors out to sea, tall cranes flying on backs of seagulls, heads floating down Fifth Avenue, the lack of space for girls to hopscotch, the dizzying onslaught of come and get it. May 25th. Dear Diary, Howie calls at 11 p.m. to ask if I ever ache for anything so badly I could taste its juices. Who is this? I ask, the voice sounding deeper and slower than Howie's. Who do you think it is? He asks, annoyed. Are you talking sex? Howie is no longer seeing that woman he was cheating on Wendy with. I mean anything, he says. I mean that ache you feel when the pale, eerie light appears after a summer shower, making the rainbow look more dreamlike. I mean the memory of holding your parents' hands as you walked in the middle and they pulled you up by your arms. When you didn't spend time thinking about a future that no longer exists. Howie, I say, I am here for you, but I think you should also talk to a professional with good credentials. There was a long silence. It's like that, Howie finally says, that ache I'm talking about. Before we needed therapists, before your friends were referring you to one, before you knew that all the coffee in the world will not save you. That ache, Lois, do you ever ache like that? Howie, I ache like that every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Penelope. That was wonderful. In Diary, the character Lois is keeping a diary of entries about her angry son with a polar bear fixation, her friends who are too self-absorbed to hear her troubles, a resentful sister, a narcissistic ex-husband. The diary itself becomes a kind of character as well. So how is it that the novel is often so funny? It's as though the diarist has reached out to put an arm around a reader's shoulders and suggest they be witty together. Penelope's third reader, Julia Slavin, cited the many flares and gems, such as sadness is a solid citizen, and I tell her it's better to meet men the old-fashioned way. She says there is no longer an old-fashioned way. The book I've selected for Penelope is Festival Days by Joanne Beard. I hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Amy. I was wondering what you were going to select, so um, I'm very excited to read the book. Thank you. And I just want to thank you for just a pleasurable year with you as my thesis advisor. Thank you.
It was my pleasure, too, to work with you, Penelope. Thanks so much. And now it's my pleasure to bring back Paul.
Thanks, Amy. And it is my great pleasure to introduce now Quinn Adites, one of our graduate students, and he will be reading from his novel, Unfinished Business.
Thank you, Paul. Just a little background. We're at the point in the novel where the protagonist's wife has just left him and he came home and found the house empty. That's all you really need to know. Norman finished the first beer and moved on to the second, searching for the courage to explore what remained of his house. He trudged up the stairs to the bedroom, empty save the bed and dresser. Attached to the dresser was a mirror, and on the mirror, wedged between the glass and frame, was a strip of photo booth snapshots of the two of them on their first date in Port Jefferson, a harbor town close to Deborah's parents' house. She'd brought him to the busiest bar in town. They got drunk and ate ice cream in the park by the water and kissed. If only it could still be that way. If only he'd known how they would end up. Maybe he would have avoided the whole thing. His life would be radically different. He would have stayed in school, discovered some hidden passion, pursued a career he didn't hate. He invested so much into Deborah, and this was the thanks he got. There was no pleasing her. All of her things were gone, and yet everything reminded Norman of her. Assembling their IKEA bed frame together, sifting through paint samples, flannel sheets he'd bought because Deborah liked to be warm while she slept. Everything dredged up some far-off memory that had been long filed away. Norman pulled aside the curtains and peered outside. The world continued. A school bus dropped off the neighborhood kids. A cylindrical truck pumped a cesspool. To think so much could happen in a life that nobody was aware of. Nothing about it was fair. Norman wanted to open the window and scream to the world that he hurt. He wanted to punch a hole in the wall, but that all would have been crazy. And so he instead finished his second beer and returned to the kitchen for a third. And then he marched into the garage and beat it at the concrete floor with a hammer.
How fortunate I am, Quinn, having had the opportunity to be your thesis advisor. It's been such a serious, fun, high-spirited ride. Quinn's novel, Unfinished Business, is a satire with a heart, a parody with a soul. Its protagonist, Norman, is a brilliantly imagined anti-hero. He's a jaded, sad sack of a guy who drinks too much and manages to get himself killed in a car wreck when he discovers his wife Deborah's cheating on him. He finds himself in an afterlife that resembles what you'd get if you put a DMV with a never-ending line in the middle of the dead mall across the highway from Disney World. And yet he has passion and he has love. And he spends most of Quinn's deft, very funny, acutely observed novel ping-ponging back and forth between a lust for revenge that is positively Shakespearean and a possibly impossible hope for some kind of reconciliation with Deborah, who he increasingly realizes may have been the love of his life and who he increasingly hopes may be the love of his afterlife, too. The book is a pitch-perfect, absurdist gem. Quinn, your writing is wonderful, and it has been a joy and a privilege working with you. And I'm just delighted that I get to be the one to congratulate you today and to present you with this collection of Kurt Vonnegut novels from the Library of America.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's definitely been an honor to work with you, and it's been so just educational and just useful to have somebody as talented and smart as you to work with me so closely on this book. I've never really had a group of people that are rooting for me as much as this. So it's been really just a great experience here. And I want to thank Susie and Amy also and everybody else in the program for helping me and just being on my side on this project and my writing in general. And yeah, thank you, everybody.
That's great. It's been our pleasure, Quinn. And now back to Luann Walker.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Quinn. How pleased and proud I am to have worked with Amy Handelsman on her memoir, Love by TKO, Life Lessons from the Ring. Amy, would you read to us from your work?
Sure. With my work and love life circling the drain, I began structuring my days around an unlikely ally, boxing. It was my latest thing. The 80s were over, along with my obsessions with running, hip-hop, dancing, and rollerblading. I had been in between sports, getting jittery and fat, when I discovered a boxing gym on La Brea, near home. I'd driven by the place dozens of times, to and from my trip to my Warner Brothers office, but I'd been put off by its blinking garishness. Anything open 24 hours seemed nefarious. But stopped at a traffic light one day in early January, I glanced up to the third-floor window, where a neat row of red leather gloves beckoned. The Hollywood Boxing Club was a large, mirrored, one-room arena. Airy and bright, the space was a world apart from the tattooed, muscle-bound weightlifters on the main floor. The gym was run by Terry Claiborne of East St. Louis, master charmer and motivator, whose skillful blend of jive, affection, and sternness won him a large and loyal following. I stepped into the room, was greeted with his usual, "What is really going on?" and felt embraced. I boxed 3 times a week at 7 a.m. My sisters were astonished. In the past, only an early morning flight could have gotten me up at that hour. I'd have gone every day if I could, at 5 a.m. if I had to. In a short time, I was hooked. The blinding headaches from overexertion stopped. I worked harder at this sport than I had at any other, and it required more in every area: power, coordination, speed, stamina, timing, balance, and rhythm. And because of Terry, it was more fun. He gave his students monikers like real prize fighters. We were Speedy, Smiley, Tiny, Hercules, Pitbull, the Slasher, Big Bad Dan, and Wonder Woman. My friend Jordan was Mr. Clean. He wore a bandana and hoop earring, and fastidiously washed his hand wraps in ammonia every night. The boy who unmercifully teased me was Mr. Cool. Fast, clever, elusive, stylish, I became Miss Slick. No pet name sounded sweeter.
Bravo, Amy. The writing is powerful in every regard. Amy was a crisis in her life. Her Hollywood job had disappeared one day. There were so many seemingly insurmountable challenges. And then she turned to boxing, as you've just heard. In looking for love, she found passion. That Johnny, the boxing expert, the most unlikely person for Amy to worship, yet worship she did. The story is astonishing. For Amy Handelsman, the book I chose is FX Toole's Rope Burns, Stories from the Corner. Toole fictionalized the boxing world, and his story Million Dollar Baby, about an older boxer mentoring a young woman, has many parallels in Amy's story. Like Toole, Amy's characters are vivid, the scenes heartrending, every detail exquisitely placed. Amy tells her story bravely, head on, no punches pulled. There is such a purity to her tale. Heartiest congratulations, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Should I say how much I appreciate you, Luann, and how much I appreciate all of the program? You know, it's funny going to graduate school at a midpoint, or maybe I don't know if it's the end of my second act or the beginning of my third act. But I remember teaching. I was teaching literacy at an all-girls charter school in the South Bronx, and the girls asked me, like, "What do you do when you're not here?" And I said, "Well, you know, I write, I consult, I go to school, I go to grad school." And they said, "You go to school? How old are you?" So I realized that one can do this at any age, and I felt very supported by my fellow students, and of course by the faculty and by Bob, and most of all by my thesis advisor, Luann.
Amy, thank you. That was lovely. And now, back to my colleague, Paul Harding, the wonderful novelist. Thank you.
Thanks again, Luann. And now here's our grad student, Alex Sniatkowski, who is going to read to you from his novel in progress.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I'm just going to go about it. A gnat hovered in front of my left eye. I stood at the back of the pitcher's mound and held my glove and ball cap at my hip as the Northern Virginia Young Doctors Choir sang the opening lines to the Star-Spangled Banner from in front of the batter's circle. Cameras caught everything. They looked outward from the palms of hands, behind the dugout in center field, and from the corners of archways at the ticket gates. They were angled at each member of the crowd and at the field, on me, on my receding hairline and faked piety, at the gnat which fluttered close enough to graze my eyelash. I blinked. No, I told myself, you can't swat it, break decorum, all that. It's all live, all recorded. I linked my thumbs and leaned forward and imagined the insect on the Jumbotron behind me, captured in a frame zoomed in on my left eye, the gnat indistinguishable from a blackhead or pimple. The smell of boat fuel wafted from the Anacostia River. Moving vivisections of American flags played on the monitors fixed to the mezzanine behind home plate. They rolled, yeah, but amber waves of grain are from the other song I recalled. The crowd mummed along the dawn's early light, as if exhuming their mornings, each returning to disparate daybreaks, to sunrise workouts, the blue light of email in dim rooms, morning prayers recited in the sheets, unmoisturized hands on partners' genitals, lingering fantasies from sleep, morning wood, pornography, self-love. My bath was particularly relaxing this morning, all committed to with ritualistic integrity, pre-game rites before the workday. The twilight's last gleaming hadn't passed over the stadium. The air was late September, autumn fragrance lurking, still hot, summer burning off, no humidity or rain on the horizon, another ball game in the nation's capital. The crowd stood devout. Fathers chastised their kids, some anxious to put their hats back on, others sneaking bites of stadium food, hands in cardboard chicken finger containers. Some probably waited for a flyover, but I was pretty sure the planes only showed up on the high holidays, opening day, All-Star Game, 4th of July, the playoffs. A disappointment for those expecting the exhaust of drone-operated planes to Doppler over the stadium and drown out the beer hawkers and hot dog vendors. Obliterate the idol. When can we interrupt you to bring the troops? If the boys in red get lucky, then tune in for the playoffs. Although the American military, like the flag, was still there. 4 clean-shaven members of the U.S. Navy Honor Guard flanked the singers, 2 on each side, bearing flags and dummy arms, their heads held high, the white flat tops of their caps taunting the rest of us with our hats off, our male pattern baldness exposed. The gnat flew close. I wanted it out of sight. I turned toward center field and thought, sacrilege, profane, blasphemer, hoping my sin hadn't been broadcast through the stadium. The Jumbotron showed the 4 troops from an overhead angle. They stared ahead still, perfect-looking altar boys, and I wanted to know where the priest was. The canners' voices echoed through the stadium. I asked myself who bore witness toward my indiscretion, and more importantly, why should they care? Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. It's just been great to be along for the ride as your thesis advisor and to watch you work up this kind of polymathic, encyclopedic, gonzo, paranoid, funny, bizarre, and righteous novel that would make Pynchon or DeLillo proud. It's been a blast to have our conversations about your thesis, about the usual things like scene and point of view and plot and all that, but then always inevitably also about everything from the CIA to Pedro Martinez, from phenomenology to Virgil, from Big Mac to Big Data to Big Brother, all leading from and back to Dante List, your suspicious, knowing, probably former Major League Baseball pitcher. And to pick a personal favorite from the book's huge cast, characters like Dante's bullpen buddy, Raul Menendez, Cuban pitching phenom, connoisseur of philosophy and poetry, and probable spy. It'd be easier to list what's not in your novel, and that's one of the hallmarks of its greatest literary merits. You mean to get all of America, all of the United States at its best and worst between 2 covers, and that puts you in the company of the finest writers. And that makes it such a pleasure for me to congratulate you today and to present you with this collection of novels by Robert Stone from the Library of America.
Thank you very much, Paul. I just want to say I'll return that. It's been a blast. It's been fun and incredibly instructive the last couple of years. I mean, yeah, thank you. The novel and all the instruction.
Great.
Yeah. And I guess,
Great.
while we're here, thanks to everyone else, faculty, the people who have shared writing and I've shared writing with. And I have to thank my grandparents for letting me live with them while I did this. So, yeah, thanks to them as well.
Oh, that's great. It's been my pleasure, Alex. And now, once again, over to Julie Sheehan.
Oh, thank you, Paul. And it's my honor to introduce the amazing Emma Walton Hamilton, who's one of those people who works harder than anyone you'll ever know. She's already conquered the world of children's literature, and now she's after us, the poets. And here she is, Emma Walton Hamilton, reading from her thesis manuscript, Door to Door.
Thank you so much, Julie. I'm going to read 3 short poems. The first one is called The Tuning Fork in the Bathroom, and this is a true story. Head erect and tines astride, the armless conductor invites the chamber to resonate with acoustic assonance. But there are no strings in this ensemble, no ebony or brass, only porcelain and tile, glass and chrome. Where has it come from? Who stationed it here? And what is the value of sine waves at the fundamental frequency in this miniature suite? I relocate this pitchfork, but it invariably returns to its post between the his and hers sinks, harmonizing with each brush and flush, and humming while I fiddle with my hair, pick or pluck at minor divertissements, and compose myself in prelude to the day. My second poem is entitled Global Warming, also a true story. The burst spigot sprays the river birch with upside-down rain, sheathing every branch in frozen glass. 100 slender jewel cases, refracting winter light and magnifying the showpiece within. One by one, the casings drop to the pockmarked snow beneath, fractured vials littering the walkway, leaving hung-over branches to droop and drip in memory of crystal-induced radiance. And finally, a poem I wrote when I learned on a science program that there's no such thing actually in our world as the color blue. This poem is called Prism. No blue birds, only blue wavelengths, bouncing on particles, glistening blue. No blue eyes, only blue sky, dancing in fragments, sparkling blue. No blue sky, only blue light, surfing on currents, shimmering blue. No blue water, only blue echoes, rippling the firmament, burnishing birds. Thank you.
Fantastic, Emma. Well, what makes Door to Door such a pleasure to read is the care and the generosity with which you attend to these worlds through which your poems travel. Like Robert Frost, you work from a healthy respect for form, playing tennis with the net up. But you share an even deeper affinity for Robert Frost's stance toward his material, which is one of disorder hanging in the balance with order. Frost was ever on the lookout for the small disturbances, the tuning forks that transform the ordinary and that nudge a description from scenic to scene. A human drama is always at stake, even when the only character in a poem is a spider. The conventions of form can never entirely contain unruly truth. In your case, Emma, the tension comes from our composite identities, the multiplicity of social roles we play and discard, the gap between our perceptions of ourselves and others' perceptions of us, and the comedy that arises when the mask slips and we glimpse the glorious mess behind it. And so, with utter appropriateness and with probably his admiration for you, I present to you the collected poems of Robert Frost.
Aw, thank you so much, Julie. I'm so grateful to you for all your inspiration, for all of your teaching, and for your amazing thesis advising. You have been just my rock, my foundation, my guide every step of the way. I cannot thank you enough. And I also just quickly want to thank Bob and Carla and Luann, because I may be the person who's taken the longest to actually get their MFA in the entire history of this program. So their patience with me for that, and also for helping me navigate the very bizarre world of being both a faculty member and a student at the same time. Thank you all so much. This means more than you can imagine.
You are a rock star, Emma, and advising you is one of the easiest gigs a person could ever have. Thank you. You are self-advising, my friend. Thank you. Thank you so much for that reading. And now back to Susie Merrill.
Thanks, Julie. And now I am thrilled to be introducing the wonderful Karina Cohn.
Thank you so much, Susie. So this is the very first section of my thesis, Nested Doll. Part 1, Woman in her 20s with Doilies. All right, 1. I'm writing a book about objects because I cannot write about my dead mother. I have dust everywhere. I do not have a sheet on my bed. If it slips, I leave it. Yard sale paperbacks careen in large stacks beside candles never lit. My floor is booby-trapped. By the foot of my bed is what I call the river, a stream of clothes, shit knacks, and electronics I jump over to go to sleep. Frequently, I bruise my ankles. Odds and ends are uncategorized in Ziploc bags, buttons and marbles I find on the street, and broken jewelry for reassemblage. I am unable to throw out pictures of people I have never met. Someone must have, I think, and stick them back into one of my mother's heavy leather albums. I cannot throw out a face. 2. My friends have noticed my habits of collection. They've brought to my attention that I take small handfuls of pink Sweet and Low packets at cafes and Hotel Continental breakfasts. I take half and half cups at diners, and when leftover food is offered at dinner parties, I pack it. To explain it best is to say this. It is a fantasy of the perfect need. If I gather as many items as I can, someday in the future their purpose will be realized. I want to give them a second chance to be helpful, wanted. I cannot be the only one who anticipates being in need of something. Surely my friends have caught themselves feeling that items, however miscellaneous, will prove useful. Yet they are surprised by how many bags of bags and boxes of boxes I own, and the overcrowded corner of my room dedicated to just that, containers for storage. Baba Ina, my grandmother on my mother's side, first presented half and half cups as bath toys. She reuses everything. A washed container of Tempty cream cheese holds her pencils, and in her kitchen drawer, she treats plastic utensils no differently from the silver. Growing up in Soviet Siberia taught her everything can have a function no matter what it is meant to do. Molding tomatoes and berries do not scare her. There is nothing she won't put in soup. My mother, like Baba Ina, rescued food containers and bottles, but also had a sock drawer filled with present bows. That's it. Thank you.
Love it. Karina Cohn is part sprite, part superpower, in much the same way that her book Nested Doll is both delicately light and perfectly grounded. I have rarely known anyone who combines joyfulness and seriousness with the ease with which Karina does. Karina's memoir manages to examine life and death issues about mourning a lost parent, sexuality, love, and Judaism, as well as matters as minute as the way to properly clean Barbie dolls and the deliciousness of various Russian candies. Although Karina's thesis was memoir, she writes everything and does it well. I've chosen for her Dawn Powell's early novels. I love Powell's eye for the perfect detail, her instinct for the psychological truth, her ability to be real and present in the moment while deftly foreshadowing and slipping in backstory. These are Karina's gifts as well, and I look forward to watching her serious play on the page in all forms as she continues on her mesmerizing artistic path.
Thank you, Susie.
You are so welcome, Karina.
I love Sprite. I love that. Thank you so much.
It's what I feel. So here it is in its little envelope to wing its way to you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited.
Oh, it's been such a pleasure, Karina.
It really has. It really has.
Oh, I know. So now I'll throw the mic to Luann.
And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Carla Cagliotti, Executive Director of Stony Brook Southampton and the Stony Brook Manhattan Center for Creative Writing and Film. Hooray, Carla!
Thank you, Luann. On behalf of the Creative Writing faculty of Stony Brook University, I present to you the 2021 recipients of the Master of Fine Arts degree in Creative Writing and Literature. Congratulations.
Yay!